Hello YouTube, we are back with DG Vanguard for the top 4 of the recent Justplaygames tournament for Cardfight Vanguard. In this matchup we have Sid using Grand Blue, his preferred deck of choice at the moment, against Michael, again using Z.T.B.S. Z.T.B.S was a very popular deck at the Justplaygames tournament, so Gear Chronicle seems to be a very favoured deck amongst the player base there, and for people going in from farther field. We're just in the pre-stages at the moment, so doing his shuffle. This will decide the final. Pairing. This game. I was in the top 4 at the tournament as well. I was facing off Alistair, who, as you've seen yesterday, was using Narukami. Unfortunately, I did not win that game, so Alistair would be going into top cut. Unfortunately, because it was starting to get really late on a Sunday, the top cut had to be, well, the top 2 had to basically split the tournament instead of having to play a final match to decide the winner. Very unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen those two face off, although the Grand Blue Narukami matchup would have been interesting, as Sid would have had to deal with a lot of drop zone binding, which can be very troublesome, particularly when you get to the realms of the GB8. We seem to be ready to go in. Sid's ready to go, and so is Michael. Deciding who goes first. Michael rolls a 11 and Sid rolls a 6, so Michael will be going first in this game 1. Now, Sid has been using Grand Blue for a good while. If you may not recognise him, he was actually one of the top 4 of Bushy Cardiff of the Nationals earlier in 2017. Obviously, he was the only non-7Cs player to make it to that point. Although back in that meta, 7Cs was a very dominating deck. To be able to come through and basically take a top 4 position without the need of using 7Cs is very impressive, especially in the Luard meta as well. Nightrose was probably next to Luard and 7Cs the best deck around, just because of the pure amount of attacks and aggro that the deck has going from first stride onwards, as well as the advantage of being able to recycle those Banshees for draws in the early game and then after first stride as well. So we're about to begin here. Michael going first. He draws and he'll have to ride his Perfect Guard, as I think he is going to be, I don't think I see another grade 1 in his hand, so he has to ride it basically. Sid rides his Necrobone and just boosts him for an attack. He gets the crit on the first drive check. That's a very standard opening move for Sid. He does like to crit a lot, although the stun triggers in his deck can also close out games probably even better than the crit sometimes. Michael has that Rewind Tiger for that first turn aggro and advantage, allowing him to go into his deck, draw cards, and fuel his bind zone, which isn't as important in the Z.T.B.S deck yet. Come set 14, that bind zone is going to actually be fairly important, as it will be able to fuel your G guards. That all important Z.T.B.S G guard that will basically allow you to get a lot of power on the shield and fuel that Chronovisor Heritage, which is the deck's new finisher. Sid gets pushed to 3 on that first turn though. A very timely stand trigger for Michael there. So Sid's under a bit of pressure at the moment. He's able to basically attack back with that the Negrovux, but Michael is able to hold fast with only 1 damage, and damage checks an original Chronojet. Very interesting choice of card. He seems to prefer riding something with Chronojet over having to ride a lesser grade 3 that doesn't have Chronojet, as the Chronojet Vanguard is the most important of those grade 3s. although the original Chrono Jet is obviously not a Zodiac Time Beast, so it has little to no synergy with the rest of the deck. Michael is going really aggro here, which is obviously a very important play. The Rewind Tiger isn't going to be able to do much on its own though, being using its skill it's only back down to 8k. Sid has to guard with a heal trigger though to keep himself safe. He's going in with the Vanguard here. He gets the stand trigger on the Manish, and he puts the power onto Rewind Tiger. However, Sid hits that defensive trigger, so that Rewind Tiger is not going to be able to hit the Vanguard, but he is going to be able to go in on the rear guard instead. So very lucky. Sid was able to survive a potentially lethal turn, or a very damaging turn to Sid's resources, and now he has to pay the cost with a grade 2 and a grade 1 to stride, although that's not as bad because it does fuel the drop zone with important resources for Grand Blue. So not being able to stride with a grade 3 isn't always the worst thing for Grand Blue, as those resources can be recovered fairly easily. Sid has a lot of damage to work with going into first stride as well, so bear that in mind. Michael is on 3 damage. That can sometimes not be enough against the raw number of attacks that Nightrose can launch. Obviously, we're going into the Grenache place here, so Sid is going to be able to utilize those to regain his resources. He's using the stride skill to call over the Gauche. Oh no, the Grenache is the starter, the Gauche is the stride. Sorry about that. Again, this is like my second time doing an actual commentary, so if I'm a bit nervous, a bit stuttery, you know, don't crucify me. I kind of want to improve on my commentary. I want to actually do commentary. I do enjoy watching games. I find it very interesting to analyze the plays that both players make. Obviously, Sid's making very standard play. His Gauche isn't at the most optimal, however. He's only called 1 unit back with his skill, and he's instead opted to use Banshees in his hand instead of calling them back to rear guard. So that is it's not the best opening move on the stride. The drag check didn't reveal much. A stand trigger will allow Sid to continue his attacks, but without a Negro Bone in the back row, it pretty much ends there for first turn. It's not looking too good for Sid. Usually his early game is a lot more stronger, and he's going to utilize the GB2 to revive his Negrovook grade 2. He did not hollow his... He chose not to hollow the Negro Lazy, which is an interesting play, I think. I'm not entirely sure what exactly Sid is planning at this point. Usually his plays are a lot more concise. He told me after the match that particularly game 1 he made a few misplays, so maybe this is explaining what those misplays are exactly. It's very Michael has a very good aggro on Sid at the moment. Will he be able to survive this first stride with an Avenir? Michael seems to be thinking over what to attack with. He's going in with the Cruising first, boosted by the grade 1. So he's able to check top 3. He gets the Transit Dragon, puts that in his hand. What will Sid do in this situation? Will he guard or not guard? I think it's a tough situation. He's going into the G guard. Okay, he could be able to make a comeback in this situation. He has the Cannoneer and drop, so he will be able to res that if he so chooses. Although, does he have enough counterblast to do that? I wonder. He's going to utilize the grade 4 G guard, and that will trigger Nightrose's GB2 if Sid decides to use it, and he will. So he's going to send 3 off the top, and he's going to res that Negro Lazy back onto the rear guard. Although he has only 1 counterblast to work with, so unless he has that stand trigger, that all-important stand trigger in the drop zone, The power is going to stop there pretty much, but I think Sid has planned for it, so he should have the stand trigger. Oh no, he only goes into the cannoneer, despite him not having the counterblast to be able to snipe a rearguard. Very unfortunate for Sid. I think those misplays that he was mentioning to me beforehand, this is it's pretty apparent, and I don't think it's going to be good for Sid. He doesn't have the counterblast, and I'm not sure how he's going to be able to guard through the rest of his turn, especially with his hand not being in the best situation. A little information about Sid though. Again, he made top 4 in Cardiff with this Nightrose deck, and he has been sticking with it fairly consistently in the meta, even without the grade 4 that it will be eventually be getting in set 14. Well, the English release was set 14. The Nightrose Stride that they will be getting is a very important card. However, Sid has been able to make the deck work and endure past that point, which is all the more impressive, I think. Hopefully, game 2 and 3 we'll be both able to see the power of the deck more and more. Sid is also, a personal friend of mine. We work very closely together on Vanguard. We are teammates as well going into Springfest, so I'll be looking forward to playing with him whatever deck he decides to use. Obviously, going into the Springfest season, the meta is going to be entirely different with the release of the new series. So whatever new mechanics, whatever new clans, that's all still to play for. Nightrose might not even be a factor at that point. Sid is still able to just guard through all this though. I think he got off fairly lightly with some of the plays that he was making earlier on. So he's going to use a little lazy to countercharge when it retires from Hollow, which is going to be able to keep him, which is going to give him a bit more resources going forward. But again, only 2 open counterblasts going into the next turn. It's going to be difficult for Sid to really mount much of a comeback, and he soul charged a crit, so again, the finishing potential for Nightrose at the moment is going to be very tough. Michael was able to successfully pull off a very aggressive turn against Sid without too much resistance. The defensive trigger did help a little on Sid, but overall getting those 4-5 attacks that Zodiac Time Beasts are very well known for getting quite consistently, it does put pressure even on some of the best players. And it's no wonder that the deck has endured and will continue to do a lot going into the future of the meta. The Gaucher is called out through Stride, but it doesn't really do much. He puts the Negrone in the back. I'm not entirely. Was Sid? I think Sid was meaning to ride Negro. Yeah, he was meant to stride Red Negro Song in that situation. I think in the tournament situation, that would not fly. He already strode into the Gaucher and continued to call and then attack. So if there was our judges were, I think, they were occupied at the time. Kieran, being head judge, was actually watching over my game at the time. So I personally think in this situation, if I was judging that game, I would not have allowed Sid to continue with the Negro Songer. Instead, I would have opted. Well, I would have. The ruling would have been Sid would have had to continue his turn with the Gaucher instead of the Negro Songer, as plays had already been made past that point. So the triple drive, this could be an important thing here. He doesn't get anything. I don't think Sid's going to last much longer at this point in game 1. Obviously he's going to give it his best. He's using the Negro Songer to call something back. He doesn't have any counterblast left to utilize though, so cards that he will bring back will not have access to the skills, so only a Negro Rook could be a good thing to swing with here, or unless he just wants to go purely at rear guards. Again, he brings the Negro Rook back. Those are going to be 16 columns. And that other Negro Rook is going to have a fair bit of power on it, actually. It's going to be about 20,000. Which is mighty scary, actually. When those turns are fully played out, a 20k boosted Negro Rook is a very intimidating card. Michael has the answer for that, though, in the form of Heteround Dragon, obviously neutralizing that power. So it does call the Night Storm off the top, but without Counterblast, that is not going to go much further. The 11k is obviously a good poke. He chooses to go for the Rearguard instead. Obviously, that's a very important card for Zodiac Timebeast, so Michael does prioritize keeping that around. Sid does not have much in hand. He does concede game 1. He doesn't see much. I think given the circumstances and the misplays, and it was a wise decision to maybe just forego that. We are in a match. We are in a top 4 match. Time is a consideration. So at that point, you might just want to say, okay, there's no point in really continuing. I know I'm going to lose next turn to that restand. So let's just go on to game 2. Hopefully, Sid will be able to calm down a bit. I think when it comes to higher stress situations, he does tend to get a bit more stressed than he may show, or choose to reveal, and that does come out in the form of small misplays at times. The matchup is fairly stressful as well, so Zodiac Timebeast is obviously a very strong deck, I guess, especially against Nightrose, as it does have some counters to Nightrose's plays. Obviously, the Heteround will be able to deal with some of the most important cards, like the Negro Bone, boosted up cards from the Negro Sanga, amongst other things. But hopefully going into game 2, Sid's able to focus down, he's able to minimize those misplays that we saw a lot of in game 1, and able to come back and show us, the reason why he's sticking with Nightrose even without the new stride. Because, if you have faced Sid, even if you have ever faced Sid in the card fight, you know how good his Nightrose is. During the summer meta, he was pretty much dominating most events that he went to, which is obviously very good. He is one, he's very close friends with our resident Susano UK player Mohammed, who is world famous at this point. They've trained each other up very well. It's a fair, easy say to argue that Sid is one of the top players in the UK. I would say he certainly has the tournament records of the past to prove it. Again, he made it to he made it quite far at Huddersfield as well later in the year. He did lose out at the time. Was it either to Dark Regulars player Andrew Hesford or Christoph? He might have been knocked out by another player. The turns are going by fairly slowly in the early game. Sid is choosing to go in that aggro plays. He chose to retire his starter in order to call he probably wants to get that to grade 0 in the drop zone, so he gets his counterblast going. He's able to get his counterblast refunded. He does not have any counterblast at the moment, though. Michael is playing this early game very interesting, choosing to focus more on the rear guards instead of giving Sid damage. Obviously, the more damage Nightrose has, the more deadly it is. He's choosing to ride into the grade 3, and he utilizes the crit. So he keeps himself on an open field, so no duplexes for Michael to control the field. No other. Ooh, he has to G-assist for the grade 3. That's very bad. That's very bad for Michael, and he doesn't hit it. Ooh, Michael has taken the wrong bus down to Whiff City. And it's not looking good for him now, because Sid is going to be able to regain some lost ground. Very fortunate. Michael has to stay on the Manish, and he's going to have to try and aggress with other things. Obviously not too much though. If Sid gets too much counterblast, a Z.T.B.S play might be in store, which is a very efficient thing, as you're able to bring back that Grenache and refund basically Z.T.B.'s cost, which is pretty ridiculous. He does not get a trigger. Obviously, he wants to limit Sid's counterblast, so he obviously doesn't have to meet a Z.T.B.S. Z.T.B.S on free Z.T.B.S when you are on free damage is a very damaging thing. You are running the risk of being double critted on that triple drive, which is even more, which has an even higher chance. Sid is returning with full aggro of all of his grade 3s. He's picked up a stride fodder, so he can. Well, he's picked up a grade 3, so he can still stride the next turn. Michael gets that very timely heal trigger. That's going to be able to keep him going and be able to choose his guards a bit more carefully. He might want to take it. He might want to just leave it. He does intercept with Vanguard. Obviously, he wants to save hand for Chi assists. He's going to have to Chi assist again. Will he hit the Chronojet this time? He does not again. It's very fortunate for Sid. He's able to bounce. He is bouncing back pretty hard at the moment. You know, sometimes what you do, you don't get the cards you need. No matter how consistent, no matter how powerful your deck, sometimes you will just brick in it. It's very unfortunate. He's going to use the crit trigger that he rested with the rewind to give power to the Pegasus, which will go for the Night Storm. Very important play, as it will alleviate some of the burden that Michael will have to deal with from Sid in the coming turns. He gets a crit on the drive check, but he was targeting that rear guard, obviously not wanting to give Sid enough counterblast for his Z.T.B.S play. Sid is keeping up the aggression, continuing to call units down, particularly grade 3s, which are harder for grade 2 units to counter rush, obviously, with that power difference. He calls the stand trigger. He is really just going, he wants to finish this game really quickly. Michael's going to no guard on 3, a bit of a safer play. No triggers for Sid, so only 4 damage, but he loses another Chronojet G. That would have been. Ooh, he's gonna have to choose this again probably. Will he get the grade 3 this time? He might have to settle for a for one of the other grade 3s. Oh, he does get the Chronojet G off the top though, off the top 5 though, so he is going to be able to continue. This game is still on. With 3 open counterblast as well, Michael will be able to do some pretty decent stuff, I would say. Sid does not have access to his Negro Lazy Chi Guard combos yet either, so, you know, a really good play is probably afoot here. That Pegasus is going to allow Michael to build a decent field, I'd say, or it's going to help him maintain a field. He's going to call out the Chronojet through stride skill, well, through the trans skill, which was time let through Chronojet G's stride skill. Transit Dragon obviously is going to provide a good amount of pluses. What will he decide to put back in with the split Pegasus? So that is an important decision. He could put the grade 2 back and call 2 grade 1s, preferably transits, or he could choose instead to put the grade 3 back and call up to 2 grade 2 units. The play would be fairly decent, although if he puts the grade 3 back, he will not get that back in the end phase, which he would have otherwise. So he might choose the stride fodder option over the grade 2 and prefer to go pluses with transits or other things. Michael is still making the decision of what to put back. Sid's field's very tight at the moment. 3 OG Nightroses in the front row. Very strong boosts. Those are all going to be doing something at some point, although those aren't really hollow units, so they can't really do much. Michael puts back the grade 2, so he's going to be able to call 2 grade 1s from his deck. Those Transit Dragons are probably going to... Yep, both Transit Dragons. And he has another unit to replace, which is very good. So Michael's going to be able to recover his hand quite well in this situation, given the situation. He's going to draw up to 3 cards with these skills, and he's going to get that Chronojet back in his hand in the end phase as well. Unfortunately, that Hypnosis Sheep, I don't think it's going to do much on its own unless he chooses to not put back one of the transits. He's choosing to draw with it, so that Hypnosis Sheep isn't going to be doing much else on rearguard, I don't think. Unless he decides to go with some kind of stand play here and put back one of the transits behind the Vanguard. Sid is opting to G-guard this rearguard, but what entirely yet, I don't know. Probably the Fighters Collection G-guard, which will fuel the drop zone. 2 triggers put in there, but the stand trigger is a very important card though. In some circumstances that will give certain cards that aren't hollow for the turn, and then bind itself to draw. Obviously a very good play. Yeah, Michael has opted not to use the Hypnosis Sheep, rather use it for attack, for just a unit to attack with, and instead just opted to fill his hand up on cards. You know, that will help him recover. Sid only has 2 counterblasts going into first stride, so that will give Michael an opportunity to recover a little bit, as the less counterblasts Nightrose has, the less effective early on they are, particularly when they have to choose certain skills amongst others. However, it is first stride. Oh, he's choosing the Negros on the play, so he does want to still keep the aggro onto Zodiac Time Beast in this situation. He does have the counterblast for it, but he will have to make some tough decisions, I think. Negro Bone is an important part of Nightrose's attack pattern, and without it, or with limited counterblasts, the means to finish a game at this point with a Necroslonger is fairly low. Perhaps he's still deciding what to go into exactly, so maybe a Gaucher would be more effective. Yes, he has decided to stick with the Gaucher. He wants to build his rearguard. Well, he wants to rebuild his own hand of the situation. It's a very common thing for a lot of top decks to do, is, you know, focus their first stride particularly on building resources, you know, getting a nice healthy hand going. Sid is deciding to get rid of the non-hollow units by retiring his front row. He's getting his Grenache back as well to recycle his counterblast in the end phase. But what else will he bring back? He did put a crit in, and he's retiring the stand trigger that he had in the back row to call that crit back. Obviously, an important play. He's going to utilize the crit to draw a card. He's got another crit off the top of that. That's again another very standard Nightrose, well, very standard play to be able to use the crit to draw, and then you draw into that other crit to get further draws. It's quite lucky. He's able to still use the Negro Bone as well, so that Negro play with the Negro Bone is going to be quite powerful, because that's a 23 column. He's going to use the Negro Bone after that attack to bring something else back from the drop zone at a counterblast of 1 for yet more attacks. So, unless Michael decides to G-guard particularly here, he's going to use a Heteran. What is he going to put back? He's going to put back the Grenache. He's going to limit Sid's counterblast. Personally, I don't know if that was the best play. In my experiences, that Negro Bone is a very devastating unit. It is probably the single best card Nightrose has, just because it isn't once per turn, and it is just the gateway to so many attacks. Obviously, being able to retire the Negro Rook in the front row and call it back standing at that point for even more attacks. Again, that Negro Rook being hollowed will swing for 16, which Michael will have to guard. He's got a perfect guard for the Vanguard. So first check, second check, third check doesn't reveal much. So Michael will be able to survive this turn. Obviously, again, the limited counterblast has sort of put a dampener on Sid's aggression. He has opted more for resources, but without the Grenache, he's not going to be able to get his counterblast back in the end phase, which could make the difference. Michael was able to guard through. I think he knew that going in. However, you know, again, I always do prioritize. I personally do always prioritize taking care of the Negrabone, even though they have others. You know, trying to limit the amount that they could potentially use in a turn is always a very valuable play. Just because it can just close games out on its own. Just the continually bringing stuff back to rearguard. Michael has an interesting choice here. His rearguard isn't very filled out at the moment. He's got a good amount of GB, and he's going to go into the gear next. Very important card. He's going to utilize the time leap. He's doesn't have many transits left, so his grade 1 options are limited. He is going to go into the countercharge grade 1. It's a very good card in my opinion. I'd say it actually gets even better come the new set, as the trigger recycling is going to be very important. The countercharge and the soul charge is going to be important as well. There's a lot of cards for Zodiac Time Beast now rely on Soul Blast for costs. He's going to utilize the Pegasus. He's going to be able to check top 3 for a Zodiac Time Beast and call it. Will he get something? He checks the Obstinacy. Obstinacy is probably one of the most powerful grade 3s. Obviously, do remember there are 2 split Pegasus face up in the G zone, so there is a blanket 2000 power on those front row Zodiac Time Beasts. So even if the Obstinacy can't get up to a magic number on its own, those split Pegasuses, well, if the unit called will be able to get up on its own, it will not be. Oh, Michael is making an interesting play. He's using the rewind tiger. Oh, this is an interesting situation. He has used rewind tiger without a stud rear guard, and he you actually have to rest another unit with it. You can't rest itself. He has bound and drawn a card. Now this has created a very interesting situation. I don't think that is actually allowed. I think the judges are going through a decision. I think given the situation, this has created what we call an irreversible game state, because unless Michael is able to refund the costs, even still it has created a state where the cards are no longer in the correct order. Even putting it back, it's completely changed the order of things. So I think Kieran was around for this moment, so I think he has to, given the situation, he has to give Michael a game loss, because he has created an irreversible game state. Very unfortunate. Sid has taken game 2. Hopefully game 3 will be a bit more lively. Hopefully no unfortunate misplays lead to an early victory for either player. You know, it's still early on in the 2018 competitive season, so everyone's still a bit rusty. Everyone's still fairly tired from the holidays as well. You know, we are into February at this point, but I guess, you know, tournament seasons have only really started up again. The shop tournament seasons are going to be starting up for Springfest as well. So people are still fairly rusty. We're all players. We're all human. We are. We're not infallible. So we do make mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes will cost us. Michael might have to learn. We'll probably have to learn that lesson the hard way in this situation, as it might have cost him the victory in that game had it gone on longer. So we do have to move on to game 3 fairly quickly, unfortunately. I think it was a pure matter of just not reading your cards properly. You know, that's a very important thing with any game, particularly card games. You know, make sure you read your cards properly. You know, we were noting last game Alistair was overpaying the cost for his grade 1 Thunderstrike Soul Blast 1 draw card. He was paying 2 Soul Blasts when he only needed to play 1. I think that situation came up in our top 4, and he didn't actually realise it. It just it does stress the point. Do please read your cards. Mark of any good player in any card game, no matter what level they are at, is the better players will know the full effects of their cards, and they won't have troubles like this because of that. So we are moving on to into game 3. Deciding who goes first. Sid rolls a 3. Michael rolls a 6. And he's drawing for turn, and he rides into his perfect guard. Sid has going to ride into his aggro. He's going to go aggro. Very standard play is to call the Grenache into the front row and aggress with that, because it's not a valuable unit in the early game. You want to be sort of aggressive with it if you can, because it's more valuable in the drop zone. And if your opponent has to waste an attack getting rid of it, that's actually better because you want it in the drop zone, so you can get the value back on the counter charge. Michael was able to hit back at that early aggro with a crit, which is very good. Sid is able to just keep pushing with more attacks though, because that Grenache is still around. Michael does have the cards to be able to deal with it though, although he has a handful of Chronojet G's, opposite to the situation he had last game where he had to GSS a lot to get to it. So he's going instead with just riding into the grade 3 and just attacking the Cannoneer. I'm not sure that was the best play, to be honest, because that now opens up the possibility for Sid to be able to bring that Cannoneer back and snipe down that Chronotran. Chronotran is a very important card as well. Losing that early on for Zodiac Time Beast is a very damaging play, because you're basically losing a potential +3 off it, from either the draw that you get from the transit, the Chronojet that you get back in the end phase, or the 2 rear guards that you could call by putting that Chronojet back in the deck with Split Pegasus and calling those 2 grade 2 attackers out. Obviously, a lot of the grade 2s in Zodiac Time Beast can hit the Vanguard on their own without the need for a boost, so that also increases the value, as those 2 Transit Dragons can then equate to higher filtering and searching for valuable cards like Heal Triggers, Perfect Guard, Stride Fodders for Zodiac Time Beast. Sid is going for the Ghosty play. It's still a very valid first stride option. Even though it doesn't get you GB2 active, it can set up drop zone, especially if you have a bit of a lackluster early game, like your Soul isn't great. There are some cards that you still want to get. You can load those in. If you hit 2 hollows, you're also going to be able to bring a Ghosty back at rearguard. Although it doesn't seem like Sid will be able to... He hits 2 hollows, so if he does have a Ghosty in his drop zone, he will be able to bring that back behind his Vanguard. Again, that makes your Vanguard a 33k column. That will make it harder to guard. Although in the early game it doesn't really matter, in the late game that can actually make a difference. So Sid is loading those hollow units in. Those are important cards: the Negralazy, the Negrabone, and the King Serpent. And obviously it doesn't use a counter blast as well. And he's using the Stride skill to bring that King Serpent back. He's able to Soul Charge. He's got the stand trigger, so if he's able to Soul Blast that, that's going to make a very important play for Sid defensively going forward. He's going to use the Negro Bone. He's going to bring back the Lazy. He's going to use Lazy's skill. He's opting not to snipe the Tran with his Cannoneer. He's instead using this opportunity to refund his counterblast. And he's using a crit. He gets 2 crits though. Oh, but Kieran does respond with an instant heal trigger on that damage check, so he will be able to survive. He gets 3 defensive triggers as well, so he is going to be able to maintain a solid defense. He's now up to 26k base, and so is Sid on his attack, so he only needs 5k to guard. However, that was very damaging. This match could have been over and done with there and then had Michael not hit that heal trigger. it was a lot of cases at the tournament today. There were a lot of heal triggers going on at very crucial moments. Whether they be on crucial damage checks or drive checking at the important time when they could go off at maximum value, taking said player into a range of safety and somewhat security. Now Michael is utilizing that Dran. He's going to call the jet out of the stride skill, and he's going to use the skill of Split Pegasus to put a jet that he's called back. So he's opting to keep the Chrono Jet that he calls from Dran on rearguard, so he can get that back in his hand, so he has something to stride with next turn. Although overall I'm not sure whether it would make much of a difference. I guess it takes a non-Zodiac Time Beast unit out of his deck, so I guess that is also an important play. Michael has a very strong field setup actually at this moment in time. If he does decide to, he's going for the Hypnosis Sheep instead, so he might be able to get even more pluses off in this situation, as he's going to be able to hit with the Vanguard. He's going to be able to hit with his 2 rear guards because of the Split Pegasus. That Transit Dragon is going to be a 16k column thanks to that blanket 1k to the front row. He's going to be able to check top 3. He's going to be able to fetch a stand trigger from those 3 cards and put the rest at the bottom. That stand trigger is going to make it an important play later on, I get the feeling, whether defensively or offensively. So basically what's going on in the situation here, Michael is going to be able to potentially get major pluses off this situation with that stand trigger, with those face-up damages. Sid is going to have to perfect guard this attack, obviously. He doesn't want to risk critting. Michael gets the stand trigger, so he hits it onto his cruising rearguard. Again, that is going to be a very important play in the situation. I think he got a crit on that third drive check as well. Couldn't see because he did his drive check off screen. So he's going to be able to add the grade 1 with the skill of cruising. So he's just going to be able to keep plussing off these cruising dragons, which is a very important aspect of the Zodiac Time Beast strategy. Is a very similar equivalent to what Gaucher can do with Cannoneer or the Banshees. He's going to be using Cruising Dragon again to check top 3. What will he add among those? He adds more shield in the form of a crit. He already has his stride fodder secured for next turn. Obviously that defensive trigger makes it easier to guard. And Michael is still not done with his turn. He is going to use the stand trigger, put the cruising that's just attacked to stand the cruising that has 21k power and crit as well. So, and Michael was able to check that able to check the perfect guard off the cruising skill, and he is plussed massively off this turn at the cost of all his counterblast, mind you. But again, with the gear next, counterblast is not as much of an issue, as it only requires a soul cost to get that really powerful restand skill. So it is in a bit of a bind here. Although he himself has 5 open counterblasts, that is more than enough for Nightrose to go off with. Obviously the Gaucher, this is his second stride into Gaucher, so the cards he calls back are going to be having 2000 power. He's going to use the tried and trusted King Serpent with stride skill to basically give more soul, fund the costs, so you have more stuff to play. You have more resources to play around with the Gaucher, basically. And he did soul charge a perfect guard, so he will be able to potentially use that in conjunction with another if he has it in drop zone to recycle perfect guards into his hand. A move popularized during 2017 with the advent of more reliable recyclable perfect guards. Arca being another one of those perfect guards that Zodiac Time Beast has access to, that allows for basically defensive recycling, which is a very important thing considering the amount of attacks and power that certain decks in the meta have. Sid is deciding on his on what cards to call back with the Gaucher skill. He's opting to go for well, he's going to be soul blasting a lot of the cards out of his soul to obviously fuel his drop zone with valuable targets. But he's going to be putting the 2k power that the Gaucher will give on the called units to good use, so that those crits are actually going to be able to hit for a number on that Vanguard, which is a very important play considering Michael is on 5k. It is on 5 damage. Sid is going to use those crits in immediately to, again, fuel his hand up, power up the Vanguard. He gets the perfect guard, he gets crit, he gets a heal trigger as well, and Sid is in a really strong position right now. He's got another attack. The Negro is going to allow Sid to attack even more. Maybe not to the point where Michael will have to worry too much about his hand. The power on the King Serpent is going to be something to worry about. He has to use 2 10k crits to guard. Obviously, what he gathered from the transits has ended up helping him very much. He's utilizing the Negrobone to call back the Lazy, and then using Lazy's skill to call back Negro Rook, so he's going to be able to attack for 11. 2 more attacks with Nightrose. You know, the amount of attacks you can launch at your opponent, given the amount of counter blasts. Sid has not even used all of them yet either. Although without another card to continue that, his turn will end here, but it has forced the G-Guard from Michael, which can make a difference. Forcing defensive cards out of the hand earlier on can make for a more deadly finishing play. Michael's hand has gone from extremely healthy to fairly diminished. I don't see many defensive cards. The stand trigger is there, but Sid is able to utilize the GB2 of Nightrose to call Lazy back, which will now open up defensive G-Guard plays, since the stun trigger is in the drop zone now. So that is going to bring back that old school defensive play. Mick the Ghosty obviously being limited because of the defensive capabilities it gave the deck to a ridiculous degree. It can still do all that and more, but since we are in a very control heavy meta, it's not as strong as it used to be. It's still very powerful, and that is why Mick is probably going to remain limited for a while. Michael's utilizing his perfect guards to get back. He's got a duplex. He's choosing not to use the duplex's skill though. Bit of a gamble. I personally would have tried to get that Lazy out of there. Or is he going for it? He might be going for it. No, he's just going in with the gear next. He's just going to be swinging at the Vanguard. Do remember again that two split Pegasus are face up in Michael's G zone. So again, that's a blanket 2,000 power to the front row units. Obviously, given the situation, Michael does not need a counterblast to do much this turn, as you know the Vanguard is going to be swinging in. The duplex is going to be swinging for something, and the Obstinacy has a fair bit of power. I believe that is +6 on that front row Obstinacy Ox. Sid is just going to, he's not messing around, he's just going straight for that G-Guard play. He's going to go into the GBT8 G-Guard, I believe, which will allow him to, well, he is thinking about it. There might be a better play available. Not entirely sure. The Fighters Collection, no, he is going into the GBT8 G-Guard for Grand Blue, which will allow him to retire the Negro Lazy and bring a Ghosty card back to rearguard, and putting 10k onto, well, he's choosing not to bring a Ghosty back with the G-Guard skill. Instead, he's just opting straight to utilizing the skill of of the GB2 of Nightrose, so when a card's retired, you're able to send the top 3 of the cards from the drop zone to the from your deck to the drop zone to bring a rearguard back that was just retired. Or instead of using the Make the Ghosty, he's going to bring back Cannoneer instead. Again, another important defensive play, probably the more important defensive play at the moment, as it is able to snipe potential troubling cards like the Hypnosis Sheep. Again, that would be able to give Michael more attacks, particularly on the powerful Obstinacy Ox. It sort of acts as like a Denial Griffin in a way, where you are able to just snipe at rearguards, disrupt combos and attack patterns. Obviously at a higher cost. Sid is going to snipe the sheep and draw a card off that as well, and then he's going to instantly move the Cannoneer to intercept with the rearguard, with the Vanguard attack as well. Michael reveals a draw, a perfect guard, and a grade 2. So he was able to defend against the first attack successfully. We know that Sid has a perfect guard in hand, so we will be able to defend against the second attack as well. Michael gets a draw trigger. He gets 2 draw triggers on those drive checks, so he will be able to recover hand. You saw that he gets a heal trigger amongst those as well, so that is going to help him defend a fair bit as well. Sid has had to use a few counterblasts to defend against these attacks as well. He's only on 4 though, so he's had to take that damage. It will give him more stuff to use as well. Obviously, when Lazy retires, you're able to countercharge those resources. Sid does soul charge a heal trigger, not the best thing to soul charge, but given the circumstance, I think he will be trying to go for a finishing move in this situation. There are a lot of cards face up in his G zone now, so a Negrosonga play is going to be very devastating. Michael is on 5 damage, even with 3 open counterblasts. That is going to be very difficult for him to defend against. Giving his hand, you can see a perfect guard, at least 2 perfect guards, I think I see, and a heal trigger. There's a good amount of defense, but I'm not sure if that will be enough to hold back the tide of attacks that are going to be, that are about to be thrown at Michael. Because when Nightrose get to this stage in the game, they are going to be very, very potent in all of their attacks, especially with Negrobone in the rear, providing further attacks on top of what Negrosonga will be able to give to this turn. Sid is just deciding what exactly to stride into. I think at this point, because it is game 3, he is wanting to choose what he plays very carefully. One small mistake can make the difference. So he's choosing to, instead of striding with the grade 3, I think he wants to save it for a Megiddo if he gets to that point. But he is going for, it is probably a smart play to keep the grade 3 in hand in case the Megiddo becomes live. He's doing the Negrosonga play, as described before. He's using the stride skill to bring back the King Serpent to, have aggro and push for counter charge as well. The 2k power that the stride skill gives to King Serpent as well will make that column threatening. Michael will have to guard that attack, as he is on 5 damage. He did not get a heal trigger during the last turn. He got one in hand thanks to the draw triggers, but it's going to be tough for him to defend this turn. Heteran might put in some work, particularly sniping the Negrobone, possibly taking out further attacks that might be coming his way. I would certainly use Heteran to deal with the booster, unless he chooses another target. What will he pick? Yes, Negrobone is shuffled back in. If Sid calls another one out though, which could be likely, his deck is fairly thin. He's milled a lot of it out. And there is obviously more in the drop zone as well. What does he call? He calls back the Banshee. Not the best, but he can... I think he can choose to hollow that and then still get... I'm not sure if he can get that skill off if he doesn't win this turn. He gets the stand trigger. That's going to give him further attacks. It's not fantastic though, as he was hoping to... He was probably hoping to call over that column with Negrosonga's ability. Although this now gives him the flexibility to, instead of calling over the King Serpent, perhaps calling over the perfect guard he just called to say bring back a Negrobone, which would give him more attacks that turn. Now he's going to use Songa's ability. Naturally, he's going to discard a card, check the top 3, top 4. Oh, he's just he's not going to even look at the cards, as that's the top 3 is the remainder of his deck. So he has to basically finish it on this turn. He's going to call back a Nightstorm. That Nightstorm is going to have a lot of power behind it. Let's see, it would be at... What power would it be at right now? The Necrosonga, the Ghostly Stride, 2 Ghost Chase, and the Heal Trick. That would be a 25 column on that. That would be plus 25 on that Nightstorm, with further attacks to come. Michael is really struggling on resources. He's had to use his last Perfect Guard in hand. He doesn't have much to do. Now his shield is thoroughly depleted. So what Sid will be able to do now is use Lazy. No, he's not. Yeah, he's going to be able to call the Lazy back. He's going to use Lazy's skill to call the Negaruk over the Nightstorm for 2 more attacks on top of what he's already thrown. Oh, he's retired. Oh, there we go. He's actually done more of an interesting play. He's retired the Ghosty boosting that was going to be that was in the back row boosting Lazy to add further attacks, and there we go. Sid takes the match. Very close. He's very depleted at the end of that. Obviously, still very late in the day. Game 3, much better. Much better display of both players by very good display of skill by both players in that final game. Game 1 and 2 probably didn't go as either of them was really intending. But unfortunately at that point, it was very late in the day. We couldn't film a final as the store was closing, so the finalists had to split. The finalists did end up being Sid and Alistair, Nightrose and Vanquisher respectively.